I returned home after a difficult operation. My heart was barely beating in my chest, and my belongings were gone. I asked my daughter what happened. She replied coldly, "We thought you wouldn't come back, so we threw everything away." I was paralyzed with shock. I sat down on the bed and wrote to my lawyer. "You were right. Let's start acting according to plan." My daughter's betrayal turned into revenge. They suffered consequences that could not be avoided. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The taxi driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, probably wondering if I'd collapse before we reached my street. I pressed one hand against my chest, feeling the bandages beneath my shirt, and tried to breathe normally. 2 weeks since they'd cracked my ribs open and rerouted the plumbing around my heart, and I still felt like someone had parked a truck on my sternum. "Can we make a quick stop?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "There's a jewelry store on Morrison." The driver nodded. I'd promised Helen that pendant weeks ago when she'd visited me in the hospital before surgery. She'd looked so worried, holding my hand while the nurses prepped me. I could still see her face, pale and drawn, as she whispered, "Please don't leave me, Dad." I wasn't going to leave her. I'd survived, and now I owed her a promise kept. The jeweler wrapped the gold pendant carefully, a delicate thing with filigree work, $800 that made my retirement account wince. But Helen had admired it in the window months ago, and I remembered. That's what fathers do. We remember. Back in the taxi, I held the small velvet box like it contained something fragile and alive. Through the window, Portland slid past in autumn colors, the trees along Stark Street already starting to turn. The driver made the turn onto my street in Laurelhurst, and I felt myself relax for the first time in weeks. Then I saw the truck. A large moving van sat in my driveway, back doors yawning open. Two men in work clothes were carrying my antique mahogany desk down the front steps, the desk my grandfather had built in 1952, worth more than my car. I watched them angle it through the doorway, their movements practiced and efficient. "Stop," I said. "Stop right here." My hand shook as I fumbled for my wallet. I paid the driver, overtipped him in my confusion, and pushed myself out of the taxi before it had fully stopped. The jewelry box felt slippery in my grip. One of the movers was already heading back inside. The other was strapping my desk into the truck bed, securing it with professional ease. This wasn't improvised. This was organized. Helen appeared in the doorway, carrying a cardboard box. Our eyes met. She froze on the top step, the box tilting in her arms. I could see picture frames through the open flaps. My reading glasses resting on top, the coffee mug my late wife gave me. "Dad?" Her voice sounded strange, high and tight. "You're alive?" Not, "Thank goodness you're home." Not, "We were so worried." Just that odd inflection on alive, as if my continued existence was somehow surprising, inconvenient. "What's happening?" I moved toward the steps, my chest screaming with each breath. "Why are these men taking my furniture?" "We thought you wouldn't make it back." She said it simply, factually. "We started clearing things out." The words didn't make sense. I'd called her this morning from the hospital, told her I was being discharged. She'd known I was coming home. Glenn appeared behind her, filling the doorway with his bulk. He had my laptop under one arm, my laptop with 10 years of research notes and personal files. He looked at me the way you'd look at an unexpected bill in the mail, annoyed, inconvenienced. "Well, old man," he said, "your time's up anyway. This house is too big for you alone." He didn't move aside. Behind him, through the open door, I could see my living room, empty spaces on the walls where paintings had hung, the antique bookshelf missing, even the Persian rug gone. I tried to step forward. My chest tightened, sharp and sudden, the surgical site pulling. I grabbed for the porch railing and missed. The jewelry box slipped from my hand. It hit the concrete driveway and popped open. The gold pendant spilled out, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Helen looked down at it. For a moment, one brief moment, I thought I saw recognition in her eyes. She knew what it was, knew I'd kept my promise. Then her gaze moved past it, dismissive, and returned to my face. The pendant lay there between us, catching light. A promise broken, a daughter who'd expected her father to die. Behind Helen, the movers carried out my leather armchair. They maneuvered it past Glenn, past Helen, down the steps. One of them nearly stepped on the pendant. I wanted to shout at him to be careful, but my voice wouldn't come. Helen shifted the box in her arms. "We'll talk inside. You shouldn't be standing in the driveway after surgery. Come in and rest." The words sounded concerned, but her eyes were calculating. She wasn't inviting me to rest. She was trying to control this moment, to manage the unexpected complication of my survival. Glenn still blocked the doorway. He hadn't moved, hadn't offered to help me up the steps. My laptop remained tucked under his arm like spoils of war. "Helen," I said, and my voice came out rough. "I bought this for you, I promised. Before the surgery, you said—" I couldn't finish the sentence, because I understood now, standing there with the pendant glinting between us, that everything she'd said in that hospital room had been performance. She'd held my hand and looked worried, because that's what daughters do when they're waiting for their inheritance. The taxi pulled away behind me. The engine noise faded, leaving just the scrape of furniture being loaded, the mechanical efficiency of my life being packed into a truck. "We'll explain everything inside," Helen said. "Come on, Dad, before you collapse." Glenn's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Yeah, old man. Wouldn't want you to have another cardiac event right here in the driveway." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. I looked at my daughter, at my son-in-law, at the movers systematically emptying my home. The pendant lay abandoned on the concrete, and nobody moved to pick it up. I forced myself to breathe. Once, twice, 3 times. Then I left the pendant where it fell and walked toward my own front door. The house echoed when I stepped past Glenn. Not the comfortable echo of high ceilings and hardwood floors, but the hollow sound of absence. My footsteps rang against bare wood where the Persian rug had been. The living room stopped me cold. They'd gutted it. The antique bookshelf that had held 3 decades of academic collection stood empty, its shelves stripped bare. The walls showed pale rectangles where paintings had hung since my wife died. The curtains, heavy velvet drapes she'd chosen herself, were gone, leaving naked windows that let in too much light. A single folding chair sat in the middle of the room, cheap metal and plastic, the kind you buy at discount stores. Everything else was gone. My legs gave out. I grabbed the back of the chair, felt the flimsy frame bend slightly under my weight. Through the archway I could see into the dining room. The mahogany table, gone. The china cabinet, empty. They'd even taken the light fixtures. "Dad, sit down before you fall." Helen's hands gripped my arms, guiding me into the chair. Her touch felt possessive rather than comforting. She knelt beside me, her face arranged in an expression of exaggerated concern. "We were going to explain everything once you were settled in the new place," she said softly. "You'll love it there. They have activities, medical staff on site, people your age." Behind me, Glenn closed the front door. The click of the latch sounded final. I looked at Helen, at this woman who had my eyes and her mother's cheekbones. "Where are the photo albums? Where are your mother's photos?" "Packed safely. We're not monsters, Dad." She said it reasonably, as if I was being dramatic. "Everything's in storage until you're settled." "In storage?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "You mean being sold. I saw the estate sale website on your laptop last month." Her face flickered. Just for a second, the mask slipped. Then she recovered, standing and moving to the kitchen counter. She returned with a manila folder, thick with documents, colorful tabs marking specific pages. "We've found a wonderful facility," she said, laying the folder on my lap. "Meadowbrook Senior Living. Beautiful grounds, excellent reviews. All you have to do is sign a few papers, and we'll handle the rest." I opened the folder. Legal documents, printed on quality paper. My name appeared again and again. "Sterling Wallace hereby agrees." Sterling Wallace transfers ownership. Sterling Wallace acknowledges. "The house needs to be sold to pay for it," Helen continued. Her voice had taken on a rehearsed quality, like she'd practiced this speech. "We can get a good price. The market's strong right now. You'll have everything you need at Meadowbrook." Glenn moved behind my chair. I could feel him there, a presence at my back. "The doctor said you shouldn't be making major decisions right now anyway," he said, his breath close to my ear. "We're handling it." I flipped through the pages, not really reading. The words blurred. Transfer of title. Power of attorney. Asset liquidation. They'd prepared everything in advance, tabbed and organized, just waiting for my signature. "How much did the surgery cost?" I asked. Helen's expression shifted. Now she was the wounded party, the sacrificing daughter. $43,000, Dad. We paid it. Her voice cracked slightly. Glenn took out a loan against his truck. We nearly lost everything to keep you alive. She touched my shoulder, a gesture meant to seem comforting. The least you can do is help us recover. This house is worth money just sitting here. You don't need all this space. I looked up at her. The insurance covered 90%. I saw the hospital bills. You paid $4,000, not $43,000. Silence. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We've been supporting you for 3 years, she said, voice hardening. Your utilities, your property taxes, your medications. It adds up, Dad. Supporting me? Something cold and clear was settling in my chest, replacing the surgical pain. I've been paying your rent, your car insurance, your credit cards. That's what parents do. Her tone turned sharp. They take care of their children. Glenn's hand landed on my shoulder, heavy and deliberate. Sign the papers, old man, or we'll have you declared incompetent. The doctors will back us up. You just had major surgery. How's that heart feeling right now? You look pretty shaky. My left hand moved to my pocket. The motion felt natural, unnoticed. My fingers found my phone, unlocked it by touch. I'd learned the pattern years ago, could navigate the screen without looking. Helen was still talking, listing her sacrifices, explaining how much she'd given up to care for her aging father. Glenn's fingers dug into my shoulder, a reminder of his presence. I typed slowly, one-handed, thumb moving across the screen in my lap. You were right. Begin acting according to plan. I sent it to the contact saved only as RF. When I looked up, something had changed in my face. I felt it, a hardness settling around my eyes and the set of my jaw. I need to think, I said quietly. I'll review these with someone qualified. Someone qualified? Helen's voice rose slightly. Like who? You don't trust your own daughter now? The phone felt warm in my pocket. The message was sent. The plan was activated. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, at the woman who'd held my hand in the hospital while mentally calculating the value of my estate, who'd packed my wife's photographs into boxes and labeled them for storage or sale, who'd rehearsed this conversation, prepared these documents, organized this moving crew, all while I was unconscious in a recovery ward. No, Helen, I said, I don't. The words hung in the empty room. Outside, the moving truck's engine started. Glenn's grip on my shoulder tightened until pain shot down my arm. You're making a mistake, old man. I stayed seated, the unsigned papers on my lap, and waited. I told them I needed prescriptions, which was true enough. What I didn't mention was that I needed distance more than medication. I'll drive you, Helen said, already reaching for her purse. You shouldn't be behind the wheel so soon after surgery. I've been cleared to drive. I kept my voice level. I need to do this myself. Glenn moved toward the front door, filling the frame like a wall. Maybe you should listen to your daughter. I looked at him steadily. Move aside, Glenn, unless you want to add unlawful restraint to your list of problems. Something in those words, the specific legal terminology, made him hesitate. He stepped back. I walked past him, feeling their eyes boring into my spine. My car sat at the curb, where I'd left it this morning, a lifetime ago. My hands shook as I started the engine, but I managed. The rearview mirror showed Helen standing in the doorway, arms crossed. Glenn was on his phone, planning something, no doubt. I drove slowly, following every traffic rule. At the corner of Stark and 32nd, I passed the spot where I'd first picked them up 3 years ago. Their belongings had filled my trunk and back seat, everything they owned after Glenn's restaurant venture collapsed. The memory came unbidden, visceral. Glenn loading boxes. This is temporary, Pops, just until my next venture launches. 3 months, tops. Me believing him. Your family. Stay as long as you need. Helen hugging me. You're the best dad. We'll make it up to you. I'd wanted to believe her. I'd wanted to be needed. The memories kept coming as I drove, each one sharp and specific. 2 months after they moved in, Helen asking to help with my bills, her fingers on my checkbook, learning which accounts held what. Year 1, Glenn's catering company failing, my savings account shrinking by thousands for startup costs that never materialized. Year 2, Helen suggesting I add her name to my accounts just in case something happens. 6 months ago, I'd noticed cash missing from my wallet. When I confronted Helen, she'd looked at me with such concern. Dad, you're getting forgetful. Maybe we should talk to your doctor about memory issues. She'd made me doubt myself, doubt my own mind. 2 months before surgery, I'd been on the stairs when I heard their voices in the kitchen below. I stopped, one hand on the railing. Helen, if he doesn't survive the surgery, this house is ours. Free and clear. Glenn, and if he does, Helen, then we move to Plan B. He's old, weak. How long can he really hold out? I'd stood there for 10 minutes, frozen, listening to them plan my obsolescence like I was a used appliance. That's when I'd gone to see Robert Finch. 1 week before surgery, I'd sat in Finch's office, terrified I was making a mistake. He'd listened to everything, asked pointed questions, examined my bank statements. Mr. Wallace, what you're describing is elder financial abuse, he'd said. If something happens during your surgery, they'll move immediately to liquidate your assets. The house, your accounts, everything could be gone within weeks. They're my family, my daughter. I keep thinking I must be wrong, paranoid. You're not paranoid, you're observant. He'd pointed to my wrist where Glenn had grabbed me the day before. The bruise there? Document it. The missing money? I'll need those statements. We're building a case for when you need it. When I need it? I'd laughed bitterly. You mean if I survive? When? Think positively, but plan strategically. We'd spent 3 hours creating contingency plans. I'd signed documents, paid his retainer in cash so Helen wouldn't see the charge, and left with his business card marked only RF in my contacts. Now, driving through downtown Portland, I felt the weight of that preparation. The notary's office was in a converted brownstone on Morrison. Inside, everything was efficient and impersonal, exactly what I needed. The notary, a professional woman with reading glasses on a chain, processed my documents without commentary. Eviction notices for Helen and Glenn, amendments to account access, medical power of attorney excluding my daughter. She stamped each page with decisive finality. These will be delivered tomorrow morning, she said, sliding them into pre-addressed envelopes. I nodded. The battle had truly begun. My last stop was the Portland Senior Support Center, a recommendation from my discharge papers that I'd almost ignored. The building was warm, bright, filled with the quiet efficiency of people who cared about their work. At the reception desk, a woman in her early 60s looked up with a practiced smile. Can I help you? I'm not sure what I need, actually. The admission felt strange. My surgeon suggested I come. I'm Margaret Cooper. She came around the desk, gesturing to a private office. Let's talk. Her office was comfortable without being patronizing. No cartoon posters or oversized furniture treating seniors like children. We talked about post-surgery needs, medication schedules, support systems, standard intake questions. I answered mechanically until she asked about family. My daughter lives with me, I said carefully. And is she supportive? I must have hesitated too long. Margaret's eyes sharpened. May I see your hands, Mr. Wallace? I extended them reluctantly. She took my wrists gently, turning them to catch the light. The bruises were fading but still visible, dark finger-shaped marks. Did someone grab you? The question was professional, not accusatory. I found myself answering honestly. My son-in-law, the day before my surgery, we had a disagreement about my care. Margaret didn't gasp or overreact. She simply wrote something in her notes, then slid a business card across the desk. On the back, she'd written a phone number by hand. If you need anything, and I mean anything, call me. Day or night. I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't offering pity. She was offering alliance. Thank you, I said. I haven't talked to anyone about this. I felt ashamed. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Her voice was firm. They do. I was placing her card carefully in my wallet when my phone buzzed. A text from Finch. Documents filed. Tomorrow morning they'll know you're serious. Tomorrow. I looked at Margaret, who was watching me with quiet concern. Be careful tonight, she said. People who are cornered get dangerous. I'd returned to the house after dark, avoided all conversation, and slept fitfully in the guest room. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. I made breakfast for 3, knowing it might be the last civil meal we'd share. Eggs, toast, coffee. Each action deliberate, controlled. When Helen entered the kitchen, I slid a mug toward her without looking up. "Morning," she said, cautious. Glenn appeared behind her, equally wary. I waited until they were seated. "I thought about what you said. You're right. This house is too big for me now." The words tasted like ash, but I continued. "If we're going to sell, let's do it properly. I've called an appraiser." Helen's face transformed. "Dad, that's really mature of you. I'm glad you're being reasonable." "I want to make sure we get the best price." I met her eyes. "After all, it's the family home. It deserves respect." She heard only capitulation. I saw her exchange a triumphant glance with Glenn. At 9:30, the appraiser arrived. Karen was professional, efficient, carrying a tablet and laser measure. She moved through the house with practiced ease, photographing architectural details, measuring rooms, making notes. Helen and Glenn followed her like eager salespeople, pointing out features: the original crown molding, the hardwood floors, the renovated bathroom. In the dining room, Karen paused at the window overlooking the garden. "Beautiful property. Excellent condition. Prime Laurelhurst location." She tapped her tablet, calculating. "In this market, you're looking at 850,000, possibly more." Helen's eyes went wide. Glenn actually smiled. That was more than they'd hoped for. I drank my coffee and said nothing. At 10 o'clock, the knock came. Sharp, official. "I'll get it," I said, moving to the door before Helen could follow. The courier held out a tablet. "Registered mail for Sterling Wallace." I signed, accepted the thick envelope. Behind me I heard footsteps. Helen curious. Glenn hovering. I used a kitchen knife to open the seal. The documents inside were dense, official, stamped with a law firm's letterhead. I read them silently, my face revealing nothing. Helen's patience broke. She snatched the papers from my hands. Her voice rose as she read aloud. "The property known as 2847 Laurelhurst Boulevard is held in irrevocable family trust. Sterling Wallace maintains lifetime tenancy. Legal title transfers to designated beneficiary only upon death of primary tenant." She looked up, face draining of color. "What is this?" "That's the trust my parents established when they bought this house in 1968. I kept my voice neutral. "I'm surprised you didn't know about it." "You never told me." "You never asked. You just assumed." Another knock interrupted her response. I opened the door to Robert Finch, briefcase in hand, wearing a charcoal suit that meant business. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Robert Finch, Mr. Wallace's attorney. I'm here to ensure this process proceeds legally and clearly." He stepped inside without waiting for invitation. Glenn found his voice. "Nobody invited you. This is a family matter." Finch set his briefcase on the dining table with a decisive thump. "Mr. Peterson, this stopped being a family matter when you began liquidating my client's assets without authorization. It's now a legal matter." He opened the briefcase, removing additional documents. "You and Ms. Wallace have 30 days to vacate the premises." "You can't kick us out," Glenn said. "We live here." "You reside here at Mr. Wallace's discretion, which he is legally entitled to revoke." Finch spread the documents across the table. Eviction notices, trust documents, legal references. "Oregon law requires 30 days' notice, which you've now received. These are the rules." Karen, the appraiser, stood frozen near the stairs. She cleared her throat awkwardly. "I think I have everything I need. I'll send you the full report, Mr. Wallace." She practically fled. Helen turned on me, her face contorted. "After everything we've done for you? We gave up our lives to take care of you. We've been here day after day, making sure you're okay. You've been here, spending my money." I kept my voice steady. "There's a difference." "How dare you? I'm your daughter." "I know." The words came quietly. "That's what makes this hurt so much." Glenn stepped forward, fists clenched. "You think you're smart, old man? You think this is over? We'll fight this. We'll have you declared incompetent. You're not well. I'm well enough to see what you are." Glenn moved toward me. "What did you say?" Finch stepped smoothly between us, hand raised. "Mr. Peterson, I'm a witness now. Any physical threat or contact with my client will result in immediate police involvement and a restraining order. I'd advise you to step back." Glenn did, but his face promised violence deferred, not abandoned. Helen swept her arm across the counter. My coffee mug shattered on the floor. "Fine, we'll leave. But you'll regret this. You'll die alone in this big, empty house, and no one will care. No one will even find you for days. I straightened my spine, looked at her directly. I'd rather die alone with dignity than live surrounded by people waiting for me to die so they can sell my life. Silence. Helen had no response. I turned to Finch. Thank you for being here. 30 days, Finch said to Helen and Glenn. I suggest you start packing. They retreated to their room, slamming the door. Finch gathered his documents, returned them to his briefcase. At the front door, he paused. Watch yourself, he said quietly. They have 30 days, and people get dangerous when cornered. Consider staying elsewhere part of that time. This is my house, I said. I'm not leaving. He nodded slowly. Then be careful. Keep your phone charged, and call me if anything escalates. After he left, I stood in the empty living room, surrounded by bare walls and missing furniture. Through the closed bedroom door, I heard Helen and Glenn's voices. Low, urgent, planning. Margaret's card was in my wallet, Finch's number in my phone. I wasn't alone, but I was still in the house with them. 30 days suddenly seemed very long. The first week after the eviction notice was served taught me that 30 days could feel like centuries when you're living with enemies. Helen and Glenn barely spoke to me, communicating through closed doors and whispered phone calls. I caught Glenn photographing me twice, once when I struggled with a jar lid, once when I couldn't immediately recall where I'd placed my reading glasses. They were documenting something, building a case I couldn't yet see. I found their strategy by accident. The printer in my old study, now Glenn's command center, was running while he was out. Curiosity pulled me toward it. The pages in the output tray were still warm. Petition for guardianship and conservatorship in the matter of Sterling Wallace, alleged incapacitated person. My coffee mug lowered slowly to the desk. Forgotten. I read faster, my eyes widening with each paragraph. Post-surgical cognitive decline. Erratic behavior. Unable to manage financial affairs. Witness statements from neighbors about my confusion and memory problems. If they couldn't have the house through eviction, they'd get it by taking control of me. I photographed every page with shaking hands, then returned them exactly as I'd found them. The hearing was scheduled for 10 days out. 10 days to prove I was competent, or lose everything, not just the house, but my autonomy, my decisions, my life. Over the next few days, Glenn's provocations became systematic. At dinner, he'd make comments about my late wife. What was her name again? You've mentioned it, but I forget. Oh, wait, do you forget? Always holding his phone, always recording, he moved my medication bottles, then asked if I'd taken my pills. When I couldn't find them immediately, he'd smile. Getting forgetful, Pops? I caught him recording once, demanded he stop. He just smiled wider. It's my phone. I can hold it if I want. You're building a case that I'm incompetent, I said quietly. Why would I do that, unless you're worried there's evidence? I wanted to rage at him, to throw him out bodily, but that's exactly what he wanted, an emotional outburst on camera. So I stayed calm, which felt like swallowing poison. The worst was Mrs. Patterson. I saw her pulling weeds in her garden while checking my mailbox. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Helen came by last week, she said finally. She seemed so worried about you, Sterling. I thought I was helping. My chest tightened. What did you tell her? About the time you asked me about my roses twice in one morning. Helen said you'd done that kind of thing a lot, forgetting conversations, repeating yourself. She asked me to write a statement. I remembered that morning. I'd asked about her garden. Then my phone rang. Finch, with urgent information. When I saw Mrs. Patterson 10 minutes later, I'd asked again, distracted by the call's content. Not dementia, just a busy morning. She made it sound worse than it was, Mrs. Patterson said. I'm sorry, Sterling. I know you meant well. I kept my voice gentle, though inside I was reeling. How many other neighbors had Helen manipulated this way? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table at 2 a.m, staring at the guardianship petition pages on my phone. Each alleged incident had a grain of truth stretched into a lie. The jar I couldn't open, I'd just had sternum surgery. Anyone would struggle. The forgotten glasses, I'd been tired, not demented. But how do you prove that? How do you prove you're not incompetent? My hand found Margaret's business card in my wallet. I stared at it for 20 minutes before I dialed. She answered on the second ring. Sterling? What's wrong? Just hearing her voice steadied me. I'm sorry to call so late. I didn't know who else to call. Don't apologize. What's happened? Helen filed a guardianship petition. She's trying to have me declared incompetent. The hearing is in 10 days. If she wins, she controls everything. My money, my medical decisions, where I live. The eviction notice becomes meaningless if I'm declared incompetent. If she wins, she controls your life, Margaret said. But she's not going to win. I'm coming over. It's 2 a.m. I'm already getting dressed. She arrived 28 minutes later, wearing a coat over pajamas, carrying a thermos of tea and a notepad. She sat across from me, poured tea into 2 mugs like she'd lived in my kitchen forever. Tell me everything on that petition. Every incident. Every witness. We're going to document the truth of each one. We worked until dawn. For every claim in Helen's petition, we found the reality. Margaret wrote everything in careful notes, asked sharp questions, found the holes in their narrative. What if they're right? I said finally, as light filtered through the window. I do forget things. I'm not as sharp as I was. You just had major heart surgery, Sterling. You're recovering. That's not incompetence. That's being human. She told me about her divorce, how her ex-husband tried to paint her as unstable because she'd cried at mediation, days after her mother's death. They take your vulnerability and weaponize it. They make you doubt yourself. But you're not incompetent. You're recovering, and that's not the same thing. She tapped the notepad with her pen. Tomorrow, we get you a full cognitive evaluation, independent, professional, unimpeachable. We document your actual state. We get statements from people who interact with you regularly. She stood, gathering her coat. At the door, she took my hand briefly. You're not fighting this alone anymore. After she left, I sat in the quiet house, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not quite hope, but its prerequisite, the possibility of hope. The cameras upstairs were still recording, waiting to catch my next incompetent moment. But now I had someone watching with me. Margaret moved fast. By afternoon, she'd arranged a cognitive assessment with Dr. Lisa Chen, a psychologist who specialized in elder competency evaluations. Over the next 2 days, she helped me document every incident in Helen's petition, finding the truth buried under exaggeration. By the 3rd morning, I sat in Dr. Chen's office, trying not to let my anxiety show. The office smelled like lavender and leather, meant to be calming. My hands still shook. Dr. Chen was thorough. She placed cards face down, asked me to remember their order. I studied them, flipped them back, got most right, missed one. My jaw tightened. Was that enough to fail? She made a note, no expression visible. Later, she asked me to solve a practical problem. If you need medication 4 times daily, 6 hours apart, starting at 8 a.m., when are your doses? I calculated aloud. 8 a.m., 2 p.m., 8 p.m., 2 a.m. She nodded, wrote. I realized she was assessing my process, not just results. Mr. Wallace, you missed one of the card sequences. How do you feel about that? Frustrated. I usually have a good memory. Usually, not always. Not since the surgery. Some days are sharper than others. I write things down now. Use phone reminders. She leaned forward slightly. That's called compensation strategy. It's actually a sign of good cognitive function, recognizing your limitations and adapting. Incompetent people don't recognize they need help. After 2 hours, she closed her tablet. Mr. Wallace, you show normal age-related cognitive changes and temporary post-surgical effects, but you are absolutely competent to manage your affairs. I'll have my report ready in 2 days. I nearly wept with relief. While I was being evaluated, Margaret returned to my house. I'd given her a key to pick up documents Finch needed. Helen and Glenn were out. She gathered papers from my office, working quickly. Then she heard the front door. Margaret froze. Glenn's footsteps in the hallway. She silently closed the office door most of the way, leaving it cracked. Her heart hammered. Through the crack, she saw him pass. Phone to his ear. He went to the kitchen. His voice carried clearly. Yeah, the guardianship thing is taking too long. If the judge doesn't give us control? Glenn's voice dropped, but she could still hear. I don't know, man. Old guy's got a heart condition. Maybe he has another episode, you know? A bad one this time. Nobody would question it after surgery. Natural causes and all that. We'd have the house clear within weeks. Margaret's blood stopped moving. She slowly pulled out her phone, opened voice memo, pressed record. Her hands shook. She captured 2 minutes before Glenn ended the call and left again. She waited 10 minutes before moving. Margaret picked me up from Dr. Chen's office. I knew immediately something was wrong. She was pale, her hands tight on the wheel. What happened? Not here. She drove to a public park, pulled into an empty lot. She held out her phone. Listen to this. Glenn's voice filled the car. The words washed over me like ice water. Another episode. Natural causes. House clear within weeks. He doesn't mean that, I said. He can't. He's talking hypothetically, venting. Sterling. Margaret's voice cut through my denial. Listen to it again. Maybe he has another episode. He's not predicting. He's planning. But my own daughter? Helen knows about this? I don't know. But Glenn lives in your house. He has access to your medications, your food, your environment. She looked at me directly. We have to assume you're at risk. The park trees swayed in wind I couldn't feel. This doesn't happen in real life, I thought. But Margaret's face told me it does. We drove to a security company. Margaret's son worked in security systems. She knew what we needed. Within an hour, we'd purchased small Wi-Fi-enabled cameras, legal to install in my own common areas. That afternoon, while Helen and Glenn were still out, we worked. Margaret stood on a ladder, positioning a camera in the smoke detector housing. Clear view of the kitchen, she confirmed, checking the feed on her phone. In the living room, I placed one inside the bookshelf, angled toward the couch. The cameras were small, innocuous. They'd never notice. I feel like I'm setting a trap in my own home, I said. You're not trapping them. You're protecting yourself. These cameras don't create evidence. They reveal truth. That evening, I forced myself to review my financial records, something I'd been avoiding. 3 months ago, a new credit card opened in my name. Application date, when I was hospitalized before surgery. Over $45,000 charged. Designer clothes, jewelry, electronics, none of which I'd bought. Helen's signature on delivery confirmations. I photographed every statement, every receipt. My hands shook with methodical anger now, channeled into documentation. I called Finch, put him on speaker so Margaret could hear. $45,000, Finch said. Opened while you were incapacitated. This is textbook identity theft and elder financial abuse. We file charges. Helen's facing felony charges. Would they really prosecute my daughter? Sterling, she forged your signature and stole tens of thousands. Yes, they'd prosecute. The question is, do you want them to? I looked at Margaret. She shook her head slightly. Not yet. Not yet, I said. I want to wait until the guardianship hearing. If they claim I'm incompetent, we show the judge their real motive. They're thieves, not concerned family. It destroys their credibility. Risky, Finch said, but strategic. I'll have everything ready. After the call, Margaret and I sat in the dimly lit kitchen. The camera feeds glowed on my laptop. Empty rooms, waiting. You don't have to do any of this alone, she said. I'm here. For the hearing. For the cameras. For whatever comes next. Why? You barely know me. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when I heard Glenn talk about another episode. Nobody should face this alone. She hesitated. I'm afraid of what happens if I walk away and something happens to you. I don't deserve this. Your kindness. Yes, you do. Everyone deserves someone in their corner. Her hand covered mine briefly on the table. The touch lasted only a moment, but it changed something between us, an acknowledgement of what was building. She left near midnight. I watched her car pull away, then turned back to the laptop. The camera feeds showed empty rooms, patient and watchful. The hearing was in 5 days. 5 days of living with people who might be planning to kill me. I locked my bedroom door for the first time in my life and didn't sleep until dawn. The 5 days before the hearing crawled by. I checked the camera feeds obsessively. The house remained tense but quiet. Helen and Glenn stayed out most days, returning only to sleep. No threats were captured, but the silence felt like storm clouds gathering. When the hearing day arrived, I dressed before dawn, rehearsed my testimony with Finch one last time, and met Margaret in the courthouse parking lot. She squeezed my hand once. You've got this. Then we walked in together. The courthouse marble was cold under my feet. Each step echoed. Security checkpoint, elevator to the 3rd floor, hallway lined with courtroom doors. Finch met us outside courtroom 3B, briefcase in hand, sharp suit making him look like exactly what he was, a weapon I'd hired to defend myself. Inside, Helen was already seated, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. The performance had begun. The judge entered, Judge Patricia Morrison, mid-50s, reading glasses perched on her nose. In the matter of the guardianship petition for Sterling Wallace, we'll hear from the petitioner first. Helen took the stand. Her attorney, younger, less polished than Finch, guided her through testimony. She spoke about finding me confused after surgery, unable to manage medications, forgetting conversations within minutes. She opened a notebook with handwritten dates and incidents. He called out for his wife at night, Helen said, voice breaking, asking where she was. She's been gone for 6 years. He doesn't remember. It was a lie, but delivered with such practiced grief that I wondered if she believed it herself. Glenn testified next, presenting his phone recordings. Out of context, they were damning. Me struggling with a pill bottle, searching for misplaced glasses, pausing mid-sentence. The clips were brief, edited, manipulated into a narrative of decline. Then Finch stood. He approached the bench with a thick folder, handed copies to the judge and Helen's attorney. Bank statements, highlighted and tabbed. Ms. Wallace claims concern for her father's financial management, Finch said. Let's examine the records. This withdrawal, $3,000 in June. The memo reads, rent payment, H&G. Your father paid your rent? Helen shifted in her seat. He offered to help us. And this $8,000 cruise in April? This $4,500 handbag in March? All from his accounts while you claim he's incompetent? Finch's laser pointer traced the money flow on a projected screen. Red circles highlighting each charge, arrows showing the pattern, from Sterling's savings to Helen's spending. 3 years of systematic drainage. Helping family is generous, Finch continued. Draining an elderly parent's accounts while claiming concern about his competence is exploitation. Helen's attorney flipped through the documents, his confidence visibly deflating. Dr. Chen testified via video link. Professional, authoritative, unshakable. Mr. Wallace demonstrates full cognitive competence. He shows excellent insight into his own limitations. He uses memory aids, asks clarifying questions. These are signs of competence, not incompetence. An incompetent person lacks awareness of their deficits. When I took the stand, I felt surprisingly calm. Finch asked straightforward questions. I answered clearly, meeting the judge's eyes directly. Why didn't you sign the documents your daughter presented? Because they were prepared without my input. I wanted legal review. That's prudent, Your Honor, not incompetent. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Wallace, do you want your daughter to have guardianship over you? I looked at Helen, really looked at her. No, Your Honor. 3 years ago, I welcomed my daughter into my home when she needed help. She repaid that kindness by treating me like an ATM. Now she wants legal control over my life. I want my autonomy restored and my daughter out of my house. The judge removed her reading glasses. The petition for guardianship is denied. Mr. Wallace shows full capacity to manage his affairs. She looked at Helen. Furthermore, the financial evidence suggests this petition may have been motivated by exploitation rather than genuine concern. Ms. Wallace will cooperate with the existing eviction notice. Any further legal harassment may result in sanctions. The gavel struck once. Final. Helen's face went white. Her attorney packed quickly, avoiding eye contact. I felt my knees weaken with relief. Margaret's hand steadied me from behind. In the courthouse corridor, Glenn exploded. He got in my face, shouting, "You selfish fool! You're destroying your own family." "I'm protecting myself from thieves," I said quietly. "You'll regret this. You'll die alone, and we'll still get everything." Finch held up his phone. "That's a threat, Mr. Peterson, on camera. You're making excellent evidence for a restraining order." Security guards approached. Glenn backed off, but his eyes promised violence deferred. That evening, Helen and Glenn left immediately after the hearing, staying elsewhere. Margaret brought wine and takeout from my favorite restaurant. We ate at the kitchen table where we'd spent so many nights strategizing. After dinner, Margaret stood and put on music from my record collection, Coltrane, Gentle and Smoky. She extended her hand. We danced slowly in the kitchen, barely moving, her head near my shoulder, my hand on her waist. Neither of us spoke. The moment felt fragile, like naming it might break it. When the song ended, we stood close, still holding each other. "Sterling," she said softly, "what happens now?" I realized she wasn't asking about Helen and Glenn. The victory was Tuesday. By Thursday morning, I sat in the police station, the folder of credit card evidence in front of me. I'd rehearsed what to say, but when Detective Morrison asked me to start from the beginning, the words came harder than expected. I need to report identity theft. My daughter opened a credit card in my name without my knowledge or permission. Detective Morrison was thorough, mid-40s, sharp eyes that had seen too many families destroy each other over money. She photographed each document, the credit card statements, the forged application, hospital records proving I was unconscious when it was filed. "When did you discover this?" "About 2 weeks ago. I'd been avoiding my finances. After the surgery, with Helen controlling so much, I'd stopped looking." "Why didn't you report immediately?" "I was fighting a guardianship petition. My attorney advised waiting until that was resolved. If I filed charges while Helen was claiming I was incompetent, it would look like retaliation." Morrison nodded. She'd seen this pattern before. "Based on this evidence, we have probable cause. I'll bring your daughter in for questioning." That afternoon, 2 detectives arrived at my house. Helen was packing boxes, preparing to move out. When Detective Morrison introduced herself and asked Helen to come to the station, Helen's face drained of color. "About what?" "Credit card fraud and identity theft. You can come voluntarily, or I can arrest you here." Helen turned to me, eyes filled with venom. "You called the police on me? Your own daughter?" "You stole $45,000 while I was unconscious," I said quietly. "That's not doing something for me. That's doing something to me." "You'll regret this," she hissed. "When you're old and sick and need help, remember who you destroyed." "I already know who destroyed what." She left with the detectives. Glenn grabbed his keys, panicking. "I'll call a lawyer. Don't say anything." An hour later, Glenn threw belongings into his car and fled. But 20 miles outside Portland, a traffic stop for a broken taillight revealed outstanding warrants, unpaid fines, a missed DUI court date in Washington, probation violations. He was arrested on the roadside, transported back to Portland in handcuffs. While this unfolded, Finch was reviewing camera footage more carefully. He found something that made him call me immediately. "We need to meet. Now. I found something on the cameras." His voice was grim enough that I drove straight to his office. He closed the door, opened his laptop, turned the screen toward me. "This is from 3 days before the guardianship hearing. Helen and Glenn are in your kitchen. They think you're asleep." He pressed play. Glenn's voice. "If this guardianship thing doesn't work, there are other options. The old man's on heart medication. A double dose? Maybe skip a few days, then overload. It would look like he got confused with his pills." Helen. "I don't want to know the details." Glenn. "I'm just saying he's 70, bad heart, just had surgery. If something happens, nobody questions it. Natural causes." Helen. "If it happens, it happens. Just make it look natural." "Don't tell me when or how." Glenn. "You'll be a very wealthy woman soon, babe." Helen. "We'll be wealthy. The house, his accounts, everything." The video ended. I sat motionless, staring at the frozen frame showing my daughter's face. "That's my daughter," I said, "planning to kill me. For money." "Sterling, this is conspiracy to commit murder. I'm required to report it to police." "Do it. Call them now. Take a moment. Process this." My hand rose slowly to cover my mouth. Then it dropped. "I've processed it. I raised her. I loved her. And she was going to kill me." My voice cracked. "Call the police." Finch made the call. I sat in his office chair, staring at nothing. For weeks, I'd been angry about the theft, the lies, the manipulation. But this? This wasn't greed or selfishness. This was casual planning of patricide, discussed like choosing paint colors. If it happens, it happens. As if my life meant nothing. The tears came then. Not from fear, I was safe now. From grief. For the daughter I'd thought I had who'd never actually existed. For the family I'd tried to build after my wife died. For the 3 years I'd welcomed them into my home, believing Helen's smiles were real. Finch sat beside me, said nothing. Sometimes there are no words. Later, when I could speak again, I asked, "What happens now?" "Police will review the recording and file charges. Combined with the fraud, the guardianship attempt, Glenn's flight, They're looking at serious prison time. Good, I whispered. It was the first time I'd wanted vengeance instead of justice, and I didn't feel guilty about it. My phone buzzed. Margaret, thinking of you. Call me when you're ready. I stared at her name on the screen. Margaret, who'd fought beside me, who'd arrived at 2 a.m. when I was afraid, who'd danced with me in my kitchen like we had all the time in the world. She was the only family I wanted anymore. The days after the police took the recording blurred together. Helen and Glenn were arrested within hours. Conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, identity theft, parole violations for Glenn. They were denied bail, deemed flight risks. Finch handled the legal coordination while I moved through my house like a stranger, seeing it fresh without their presence poisoning every room. On the third day, I received a call from the detention center. Helen wanted to speak to me. I almost refused. But some part of me, the father I used to be, needed to hear what she'd say. The detention center smelled like disinfectant in desperation. I picked up the phone handset, heavy and institutional. Through the security glass, Helen appeared. No makeup, jail uniform, hair unwashed. She looked diminished, smaller than I remembered. She started immediately, words spilling out. Dad, please. This is all a misunderstanding. I never would have hurt you. Glenn said those things, not me. I was scared to disagree with him. You know how he is. I stayed silent, just listened. I never would have let him hurt you. I was going to warn you. The police are twisting everything. I made mistakes, I know that. But I'm still your daughter. You're all I have. Her performance was practiced, desperate. Tears on cue. The concerned daughter act she'd perfected. I let her finish. Then I spoke, my voice level and cold. You threw away my belongings while I was in the hospital, thinking I wouldn't come back. Now I'm throwing you out of my life. Permanently. I placed the handset back in its cradle. Helen's mouth kept moving on the other side of the glass. She was shouting now, soundless behind the barrier. I stood, turned, walked away. The door closed behind me with a heavy click. Outside, sunlight hit me like a physical force. Margaret was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against her car. She didn't ask how it went. She could see it on my face. We drove to a quiet park, sat on a bench overlooking a lake. I talked, slowly at first, then faster, about raising Helen, about her mother who died when Helen was 15, about the signs I'd missed or ignored. Margaret listened, sometimes holding my hand, sometimes just sitting close. When the tears finally came, deep, racking sobs I'd been holding back for weeks, Margaret held me. Not the tears of a victim, but the tears of a father grieving a daughter who never existed the way he'd imagined. The next day, I met with Assistant District Attorney James Park. He explained the charges, potential plea deals. Helen's attorney wanted to negotiate. Drop the attempted murder charge. Helen might get probation on the fraud. Park looked at me. It's your call. You're the victim. If you want to show mercy... No mercy. My voice was firm. They planned to kill me. Not in passion, not in confusion. They discussed methods. That's not a mistake. That's calculation. I want them to face full consequences. Park nodded, made notes. Glenn's facing serious time. Helen will likely try to cut a deal by testifying against him. If she cooperates, what would she get? Probably supervised probation, restitution, and a felony record. No jail time. I considered this. That's acceptable. But I want restitution in full, and I want her inheritance rights legally severed. We can include those terms in the plea agreement. 2 days later, I returned home to find a court-appointed officer supervising the removal of Helen and Glenn's belongings. Everything they'd brought into my house was being packed, inventoried, stored. I watched from the doorway as furniture left, clothes left, electronics left. The officer handed me a receipt. These items are now in public storage. They can claim them when released, or after 30 days you can dispose of them. I signed. The house echoed, empty in places, but the emptiness felt clean, not lonely. Margaret arrived as the truck pulled away. She looked around the bare living room. Want help making it yours again? I smiled for the first time in days. Yes, let's start over. 1 week later, Finch called. Helen had accepted a plea agreement, guilty to fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. 3 years supervised probation, felony conviction, 500 hours community service, and $87,000 in restitution. Most crucially, she was legally disinherited, a court order stating she had no claim to my estate. Glenn received 18 months in prison for conspiracy to commit assault, fraud, parole violations, and his outstanding warrants. I received the news with grim satisfaction. Not vengeance. Justice proportional to the crime. That evening I sat alone in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Margaret and I had strategized, where I'd discovered the fraud, where we'd danced. I thought about the journey from hospital discharge to this moment. I'd lost a daughter, but she wasn't who I thought she was anyway. I'd gained clarity, autonomy, and the respect of having stood up for myself. Most importantly, I'd gained Margaret. I picked up my phone, called her. Would you like to come over? Not to plan or strategize or solve anything, just to be here. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She arrived with wine in her overnight bag. Thought I might stay, she said simply. I took the bag from her hand, set it inside the door. I'd like that. 2 weeks passed like a slow exhale after holding your breath for years. Margaret officially moved in, her belongings mixing with mine in a way that felt natural, not invasive. We repainted rooms, chose new furniture together, hung photographs of us at the coast, at the mountains, living the life I'd been too busy surviving to enjoy. Helen's first restitution check arrived, $1,450, the first of 60 payments. I endorsed it over to the Portland Elder Advocacy Fund and felt lighter with each signature. Glenn was in prison. Helen was on probation, living in a court-mandated apartment, working retail. My attorney finalized my new will. The house and my assets would go to charity, specifically to organizations supporting elder abuse victims. I'd found my purpose in the pain. Late August afternoon, Margaret and I sat in rocking chairs on the front porch, new additions we'd chosen together. The house behind us showed signs of life, curtains and windows, flowers in pots, warm light from inside. What are your plans for today? Margaret asked. I thought I'd work on the memoir for a few hours, maybe tackle that garden bed this afternoon. You? Advocacy center in the morning, 2 new clients dealing with financial exploitation. I want to be back by 3 for our walk. Our walk? I like that it's become a routine. Good routines. The kind we choose, not the kind we're trapped in. Yes, exactly that. I met with Finch one final time, not for battle, but for closure. He presented the executed documents. Helen's disinheritance recorded, my new will notarized and filed, the restitution payment plan formalized. How do you feel now that it's all finished? Finch asked. Resolved. Not satisfied, that seems too victorious. But resolved. They faced proportional consequences. I didn't seek their destruction, just justice. You're one of the few clients I've had who understood that difference. Most people want revenge, disguised as justice. Revenge would have meant trying to destroy them beyond what they deserved. Justice meant holding them accountable for what they did. There's a line, and I tried to walk it. Finch extended his hand. You succeeded. Good luck, Sterling. It was the first time he'd used my first name. That evening, Margaret hosted a small gathering. People from the Senior Support Center, a neighbor, Finch, and his wife. Not a celebration of victory over Helen and Glenn, but a celebration of my new chapter. Mrs. Patterson arrived, nervous. Sterling, I wanted to say again how sorry I am. I thought I was helping. You were trying to help. You were manipulated, like I was. I don't hold it against you. This house feels different now. Lighter somehow. It is? We're making it a home again. After the guests left, Margaret and I returned to the porch. We talked about plans, a trip to Europe next spring. I'd always wanted to see Rome. Margaret wanted Paris. Art classes at the community center. Volunteer work with elder advocacy groups. So Rome in the spring. Are you serious about that? Margaret asked. Completely. I've wanted to see the Colosseum since I was teaching Roman history. Never had time. Never had reason. Now I have both. We're really doing this, building a life together. Is that a question or a statement? A statement, but one I like saying out loud, making it real. It's real. You're here. I'm here. This is real. We sat in comfortable silence. Then I asked, Do you think about her, Helen? Sometimes, do you? Less often than I expected. When I do, it's not anger anymore. It's just sad. Like mourning someone who died, except they didn't die. They just never existed the way I thought. That's grief too. Valid grief. I know. I'm working through it. But here's the thing. I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret any of it. If I'd let her take control, I'd be in a nursing home right now, or worse. Instead, I'm here, with you. You saved yourself. That's what I love about you. You learned to fight for your own life. I paused. What you love about me? Yes, what I love. Is that okay? That's more than okay. As the sun set, we sat close, her head on my shoulder. Inside, the house glowed with warm light, windows visible from the street, a beacon of life and warmth. I thought this house would be my tomb, I said quietly. Instead, it's my beginning. Margaret lifted her head, looked at me. Our beginning, I smiled, nodded. Our beginning. I want this to work. Us. It already is working. We're already here. This is it working. I laughed. That simple? That simple. We choose each other. Every day. That's all love is. We sat as darkness fell. I wasn't afraid of the night because we'd face it together. The house was mine. The life was mine. And the woman beside me, she chose to be here. That was the greatest victory of all. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.